let's queer up trans rights. It's official. Caitlyn Jenner says trans women are not real women. Wait, what? Former Olympian Caitlyn Jenner, now a Fox News commentator, sparked controversy this week by asserting that trans women aren't, quote, real women, unquote, and advocating for chromosomal testing in sports. Since publicly transitioning in 2015, Jenner has faced criticism for her views on the transgender community. She supports restrictions on trans athletes in women's sports, denounces woke culture, and criticizes the radical rainbow mafia. In a joint feature with ex-Olympian Sharron Davies in the Telegraph, they reminisced about their Olympic careers and discussed mandatory sex tests for athletes. Davies recalled a simple sex screening card in 1976. She said, quote, I have a little card from 76 that was a sex screen. And it was so simple, just a little swab to the inside of your mouth once in a lifetime, because humans cannot change their biological sex, end quote. Jenner echoed this same sentiment, advocating for the return of sex tests in sports to preserve the integrity of women's competition. Despite her stance, Jenner did acknowledge a disagreement within the transgender community. She reflected on her own identity, recognizing her transgender status, while acknowledging her genetic makeup. Meanwhile, Jenner prepares to launch a podcast with ex-son-in-law Lamar Odom, named Keeping Up with Sports. The podcast aims to offer a unique perspective on athletics. Sugar Ray Leonard is set to be the first guest on the show. Well, this is a very, very controversial topic in our community. It really is. I know what I am. Okay, I know the lane that I am, and I will never be a cisgendered woman. I'll never be that.
Right.
I am a transgender woman.
Right.
And I know my lane. I'm not delusional. I know what I am.
Right.
My thing is, well, first of all, I got to say this too about Caitlyn. To me, she's a trans woman, but in her mind, she's still a white Republican man. Like the way she thinks.
Right.
It really, I mean, that's like how I see her a lot of times when because to be a part of our community, you, I think, need to be a little more open in your mentality. And she has stuck to her conservative. Now, I'm not saying you can't be conservative, but I just think that she didn't have the struggle that a lot of us trans women had when a lot of us were rubbing two nickels together to live our truth. And maybe because of that, her not having the struggle, she isn't really able to like completely relate to the community. Now, in regards to sports, you all might be a little surprised as to what I'm going to say.
You agree with her?
I kind of agree with her. Now, this is the thing. We trans women, I think oftentimes we're not as strong as like men, genetic men, but we're probably a little stronger than genetic females. Like, you know, if you were going to like do an average out, the ideal thing to me would be for us to have our own leagues. But unfortunately, it's not enough of us to do that. But that would be the ideal thing, because then there would be no question, you know, we could play amongst each other. Like, you know how women had to create their own leagues. They couldn't play with the men. So that would be, and I know it would be kind of, some people would think that it would be segregating a little, but sometimes I feel like you have to create your own to really make it happen. Now, I'll use an example. Jazz Jennings, right? Someone like Jazz Jennings. I think that it's a fair playing field. She could play with the women and it would be pretty much a fair field. But then I can't remember the athlete at Penn State, the swimmer, that, you know, when she was on the men's team, she placed like really, really low. in numbers. When she got on the women's team, she was number 1.
No, she won one race. She lost most of her races.
Oh, she did?
Most of her races.
Most of her races. Okay.
She just happened to win one.
Oh, I just knew about that.
No, the women beat her all the time.
They did. Well, then what is, okay, so then, all right.
We talk about this a lot. I like an adjunct at Barry University for sports management. People who want their sports management degree, their masters.
Yeah.
We discuss this issue all the time.
And what is like the consensus?
Most of the young people are like, we don't care. Like, we don't care at all. I personally, being an athlete, I was a tennis player. We play mixed doubles in tennis. The guys hit against the girls all the time. It's a guy and a girl against a guy and a girl.
Yeah.
And nobody says you can't be there. When I was in high school, there was a girl who was really good. She played number 1 on the boys team. She beat all the boys. She went undefeated, right? Because she was better than them. Because a lot of times in sports, it comes down to skill. It doesn't always come down to brute strength. So one thing I think is it depends on the sport. Now, if it's weightlifting, that may be a brute strength kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But most sports, it takes a lot of skill. No matter what kind of a man you are, you're not going to beat the number 1 tennis female player right now. And most men on the planet will not, right? Last week, a young woman now has the basketball score title. Right? She beat a title that a man held for the last 40 years, and now it's a woman that has scored the most points in professional basketball because it's about the skill, right? And so I think that a lot of times, just because at this point in history, we're really, really, really trying to harm the transgender community and make them kind of the evil for all things. I don't think it's that serious.
Wow.
I think that we can have open tournaments as an example. So when you go to show up, you can play in the open. When you play in the open, you play against everybody. Think of it like when you run the marathon. When you run the marathon, everybody runs on the same road. You don't know who's who, and it doesn't matter. Whatever your time is when you cross the finish line is what your time is. And it doesn't matter who's running, right? Whether they're male or female or trans or anything. So I think we have room to really explore. I think we're going to follow the science. I think in 1976, whatever that swab was in 76, our science has come a long way since then. We've learned a lot since then. And I think medical science is erring on the side of everyone can play. Because most sports, it's based on skill. Now, like I said, there may be a couple of sports where you're like, okay, there may be an advantage. But then if you're going to do that for trans, you have to also do that for other genetic anomalies, like that super great male swimmer. Remember that guy who won all the Olympic medals? Michael Phelps. When they tested him genetically, he had a genetic marker that was off that made his arms really, really long and made his feet really, really, and genetically he was really predisposed to be a swimmer. So it's like, well, then should he not get to participate because he has a genetic advantage over most swimmers? I mean, where are we going to draw this line?
Yeah, and do you remember the South African runner who was very quote unquote male looking, and they tested her to make sure that she wasn't male. So
they took her medals away.
Yeah, they did,
because she's intersex.
Yes.
And so the thing is, I think a lot of it is really overblown. I think everybody needs to play. I think that outside of very, very specific cases, it really shouldn't be an issue. We should just let people play.
You know what? We need you, dear Lord. We need you to advocate for us when it comes to sports. I mean, I didn't even look. You really broke it down, and I'm a trans person, and you broke it down for me.
Yeah.
Well, so I mean, I was always terrible at sports, so don't even get me involved in this conversation. It just never happened.
I would have thought something totally different.
I know. I give football away.
I see
Don't feel bad. I wanted to be the cheerleader when the boys were playing football in the neighborhood. Well, what do you feel about it? Like, I'm just curious to get your input.
I feel that they keep trying to say that trans is a mental health disorder, and we all know that sports are a great way of creating healthy minds and promoting community and actually doing mental health. So if you want to actually get rid of that stigma, let them play.
Yeah.
So
Let them be more let them have fun. And you know what? Let it be what's going to be. I think that there are people in every field that are, I was a professional dancer, was a dance sport competitor for 20 years, and I don't have to have all the answers, but I know that what my field requires needs this. So I don't have to fix all sports, but I can do what I see in my community to make a difference, to make it inclusive for everybody. And I think someone who knows football should do football. Someone who knows volleyball do volleyball. And I think if we put the right people and acknowledge their skills and their expertise, give them the ability to create the solutions for us on an individual case-by-case sport league basis, we'll actually get somewhere instead of trying to make it a blanket statement.
Wow.
It's just not fair.
So what I'm getting is that there's just another way to use discrimination against.
I think
Exactly.
we were to create leagues that were inclusive, but we stopped waiting for other leagues to include us. And create leagues that included them. We'd have a much more progressive.
Exactly. Like open sports.
Well, I was saying to a girlfriend, if we could have done that, she was actually trying to do the trans leagues. It would have been some good money, because I think people would have just tuned in. Even if they were against us, they would have tuned in to see us play. You know, it could have been, hey, it could have been, it could have been interesting.